Space, the final frontier. You're going on a voyage today of a Starship podcast. Its mission, to seek out new life and new civilization. My name's Mischke. I'm going to feature a guest from Florida, a fellow Hubbard Radio podcaster out of Florida. As many of you may know, Hubbard Radio has stations in some dozen different states. In the world of Hubbard Broadcasting, his podcast is the most listened to. And you're going to find out why. That's after our first break. After, not right now. Right now, we're going to do something completely different. Wait a minute. Before I leave that subject, James Kirk said week in and week out when I was a kid, space, the final frontier. You know, that made sense back then. That's right, Jim. Sure, I get it. It's the final frontier. But I was a kid, and I was an idiot. And Jim Kirk, it turns out, was an idiot, because that statement is inane. Take a good hard look at this, folks. In the history of frontiers, what do we have? We have humanity heading out of the African savanna, moving into new worlds. Those new worlds are the new frontiers of that time. The ocean eventually presents a new frontier. What's on the other side of that ocean presents a new frontier. Europeans arrive in America and they settle the East Coast. The colonies are born. And the great open West is called the frontier, and people head out into that frontier. And by the late 1800s, they say the frontier is no longer, it's been tamed. So we move on looking for new frontiers, and we come to call space the final frontier. But ask yourself, does that make any sense at all? Number one, we have been in space the entire time. Earth is in space. So from the beginning, we are already in the frontier of space. Space is not a separate frontier, okay? Now, you could call the moon a frontier. Mars, you could call a frontier. The next frontier, somewhere else in our galaxy. Other galaxies out there, new frontiers down the road. You could call all of these frontiers, or you could call it all space and make it one giant frontier. Space, the final frontier. No, it's the only frontier, you lunkhead dunderpate. It's a ridiculous statement, and you made it week in and week out. You hammered that into my little head as a kid. Get out of here. Go find Lieutenant Uhura and make out with her. You know you always wanted to, but you thought she preferred Spock. You were confident as a captain, but not as a lover. You didn't have the guts to try to go for her. You must have had a weird relationship with your mother growing up, Kirk. She screwed up your life somehow. She used to put you in a little rocket outfit and launch you off the roof into her garden bed. You screamed, "No, Mama, no, I want to be a florist." Shut up. I'll make a man out of you yet. How come we never saw Jim Kirk in therapy? Are there no therapists in the future? Only guy Jim had to talk to was a medical doctor. I'm not a psychologist, Jim. I'm a simple country doctor. We didn't sign on any psychologist, Bones. You got to do what you can. Come on. My brain is broken. My mama messed with me. I haven't even told you the potty training stories yet. All right, enough of that. We'll get to the space stuff after the break. I've been hearing from a lot of Fish fans. I'm talking about the band Fish. I've been hearing from them in texts, few emails. Apparently they got robbed recently. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame did not recognize Fish, even though the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame asked fans to vote, and the fans overwhelmingly wanted Fish brought into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in greater numbers than voted for anybody else. But the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the voting members said, no, Fish can't get in. And I think it's just because of the name. I really do. I think the name falls short. I always have. I think it's one of the worst names for a band. Fish. Frankly, it's icky. I just see something lying on shore, smelling. I don't care for the name. Now, you can say names are really tough to come up with, and they are, but fish came up with this name decades ago. It's different now. It's exceedingly difficult to come up with a good name today. I mean, when the band Trampled by Turtles came up with their name, they could pretty much be sure no one else had that name. I don't know if you can be sure with any name today. I've known guys in bands who've sat around getting stoned, throwing out random nonsense, then Googling it, only to find it's already taken as a band name. Just nonsense. They'll just throw out nonsense, and it'll be a band name somewhere in Ohio. I did some work earlier today seeing if I could come up with band names that were still available. I don't know if anybody listening is trying to put together a band, but I have band names right now that are still available. They have not been taken. And these are names I just made up, but they are available. Won't be come tomorrow. Right now, you can name your band the Blazing Whale Gropers. The Blazing Whale Gropers has not been taken. You can get blazingwhalegropers.com. Make that your band name if you want to. You can also have a band name that is the Shouting Hive Dwellers or Clown Liver. And you can name your band Witch Tracheotomy if you want. Again, these are not taken. My favorite would be Infinite Crabgrass. That's available right now. Again, for a limited time. These names, I would grab them. Actually, Grab 'em is available as a name as well. Might be a good name for a band. Grab 'em. But obviously the great band names were taken long ago. Velvet Underground, Moody Blues, Parliament Funkadelic, Question Mark and the Mysterians. The great names have been taken. Now, some people out there like to have a little fun with their band names. And that can be funny the first time you hear it or the second, but it gets old over the long haul. And I'm thinking now of bands like Kathleen Turner Overdrive, bands like Mary Tyler Morphine, John Cougar Concentration Camp, Gringo Star. It's funny the first time, but you're hopefully going to be around for a while and be a successful band, and I think the name doesn't work long term. There are a lot of band names I don't like. I don't like the band name Get Cape, Wear Cape, Fly. That's a real band out there. You can Google it. Successful band, Get Cape, Wear Cape, Fly. 3 different sentences in that name. A lot of work to get through that name. Another band name, Say Hi to Your Mom. Real name for a successful band. Rubs me the wrong way. I guess I'm against mom being in the name of any band. Here's another band name I don't like, and I'm not the arbiter. I'm just saying I don't care for it. Betty's Not a Vitamin. That's a band name. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Betty's Not a Vitamin. I never understood that name at all till I learned that Fred, Wilma, Barney, and Dino were vitamins in the Flintstone Vitamins line, but not Betty. However, the Bear Company, learning of this band name, eventually made Betty a vitamin as well. True story. Another couple of band names I don't really like. Here's a band called Someone Still Loves You, Boris Yeltsin. Just too damn long. Another here, Dogs Die in Hot Cars. Not working for me. None of these bands, by the way, that I'm naming here made the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think there's a connection. Bad name, you don't make it in. Fish didn't make it in. You know what the names of the most popular music groups in the 1940s were in America? Glenn Miller Orchestra, Duke Ellington Orchestra, Count Basie Orchestra. Life was simpler back then, musically. Steve Allen, the television talk host, he said back around the time that I was born in the early 60s, he said he thought Dow Jones and the Industrials would be a great name for a band. Well, in 1979, someone finally took him up on it. Dow Jones and the Industrials was formed in 1979, and they eventually put out an LP featuring the song Ladies with Appliances, which I think is probably a band name for someone else right now. Ladies with Appliances? That's got to be a band name somewhere. Anyway, Phish didn't make it. And after 4 decades, I doubt they're going to try to change their name in order to get in. I just think they should. I don't know. I just think if they'd done more with the whole fish thing, they might have had a shot. Jumping fish, or fish hook, fish bone, fish eyes, slimy fish. But just fish by itself, it just lies there as a name. Just lies there and smells. Fish. I'm all for naming a band after some creature, don't get me wrong. I like that. The crickets, the yardbirds, the eagles, the monkeys, the stray cats, the black crows. I just think Phish needed something else in their name. Epileptic Fish, maybe. Or John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Or how about Fish Toupee? Fish Toupee kind of has a cool ring to it. Notice Bob Marley and the Wailers made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Something to think about. The Wailers, not the whales. They were wailers. They were doing something. They were active. They were wailers. See? The Fishers. Maybe the Fishers might have made the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Fishers. You people who think I'm crazy, saying the reason they didn't get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was because of their name, might want to think again. I did some research on this. Mookie Blaylock didn't make it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until they changed their name to Pearl Jam. Anna Friday didn't make it into the Hall of Fame until they changed their name to Radiohead. Smile did not make it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until they changed their name to Queen. Same thing with the band Atomic Mass. They had to change their name to Def Leppard to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Pendletons were not allowed in. When they became the Beach Boys, boom, they got in. Wicked Lester, nope, you're not in. What, you're changing your name to Kiss? Come on in. The Screaming Abdabs, no way. Well, how about if we're Pink Floyd? Usher them in, boys. The Salty Peppers? Can the Salty Peppers be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? No! How about if we're Earth, Wind, and Fire? Damn straight you can be. Way to go. The Gollywogs? Can the Gollywogs come in? Beat it! All right, we're Creedence Clearwater Revival then. Get in here. I'll give you some more evidence, all right? Phish did not get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, nor did the band Squid, nor did the punk band Lobster, nor did the hardcore metal band Carp. Fish, Carp, Lobster, Squid. Nope. Did that Portland indie rock band The Crabs make it in? Nope. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame says no to Fish, Crab, Squid, Lobster, Carp. Coincidence? I doubt it. Well, I'm going to come back with our man from Florida, the podcaster, who's going to take us into space, the only frontier. Bradshaw and Bryant, they're my law firm, bop-a-doo-dee-doo-doo. Before them I had a lawyer, who was a slithering worm. Give it to me now. Before Bradshaw and Bryant, every lawyer that I knew saw me as an ATM. Oh, the funds they withdrew. Now I have attorneys, down wearing a superhero cape from the pains of the world. Yeah, they will help you escape. They do not ask for money unless they win your case and put a big fat smile all across your face. Bradshaw and Bryant love you more than your mom. Find them at Minnesota, personalinjury.com. There is a difference between an assisted living facility that has a wing for memory care, a section for memory care, an area for memory care, and the Wellshire of Bloomington and Medina. One makes memory care a piece of the puzzle. The Wellshire makes memory care the one and only focal point, the thing they specialize in, breaking memory care down into 4 phases, tailoring every inch of their building, their rooms, their offerings to this idea that people with dementia and Alzheimer's will be negotiating it. It's a night and day different approach. If you're dealing with a loved one needing to be placed in a memory care facility, tour the Wellshire of Bloomington and Medina. They offer something that looks a lot like love. It sure as heck is loving care. Thoughtful, loving care. The Wellshire of Bloomington and Medina. Stephen Diener is the host of the Unidentified Alien Podcast, or UAP for short. He started his radio career in South Florida a decade ago. But since the summer of 2021, he's been hosting UAP, a podcast focused solely on the UFO, UAP, extraterrestrial phenomenon. And his podcast has exploded. It is the most popular podcast in the entire Hubbard Radio network, which includes programs in a dozen different states. Just this year alone, Stephen's podcast has received well over 1 million downloads. It's one of the most listened to shows within the entire UFO community. So I'm welcoming a fellow podcaster, a fellow Hubbard employee, a fellow member of the Hubbard Radio network, Stephen Diener.
Hey, Tommy, how are you?
Good. Good to make your acquaintance. There seems in this world to be 2 different camps. One camp paying no attention whatsoever to the UFO, UAP, ET story, and the other camp immersed in it, and immersed in a way that they have the ability to talk about it endlessly because there's so much there, so much information, so much research, so much documentation, so many whistleblowers, so much history, so much evidence. Again, one group lives in those waters, and another group, I don't know, I heard something about UFOs, but I don't know that much about it. And what's really frustrating is that there are very few other examples of that. Most subjects, sitting in a cafe, sitting at a bar, most subjects you can talk about knowing the other person knows something. This subject is the weirdest thing to be interested in. I'm interested in it, and I'm in circles where I have to talk like a 6-year-old sometimes because the other people don't know a thing. And that is the world I've found that's out there. What about you?
I think you're dead on, honestly, and I experienced that just in my own life, really, in kind of like a microcosm type of way. I'm in the latter camp that you spoke about, obviously super into it. I like to think of myself as knowledgeable, keeping up with the past and the current things, can talk about it all day, but then I speak to my wife about it and she has no idea. It's just funny to hear you talk about it with the 2 different camps and how that relates to my own life on that micro scale here in my own home. And it's one of those things where you really have to go down the rabbit hole. And if you're not down the rabbit hole, unless you really dig into it, the divide is just massive between those who are into it and those who just kind of casually hear about it.
I mean, you go to dinner parties and you bring up this topic, And there are people who will say things that will indicate to you they haven't looked into this at all, but they're pretty sure there's nothing to find when you look into it. Nothing really there. It's all just smoke and mirrors. And you have to look at them and say, that might have been the case several decades ago. There might have been a time when you could say that. That is not the case now. There is an astounding, and the word astounding is, I think, an understatement, an astounding amount of evidence, a shocking amount of legitimate sources reporting that this is a phenomenon that we are being faced with. It is no longer the case that UFOs, UAPs are a figment of someone's imagination or that they're easily explainable. We are so far beyond that, and we are so deep into the world of government officials, former Department of Defense officials, people with incredible credentials, reputations, just finally saying, yeah, this is a phenomenon. Clearly, this has been going on for a long time. We've been dealing with it, and there are these very secretive parts of government or offshoots of government that are keeping a lot of this quiet. We are at that point where we can all say that and be pretty comfortable we're all on the same page. Well, only if you're reading about this, learning about this, studying this. So it's a place that I don't like because you're either preaching to the saved, talking to people who already are into it, or you're having to talk like a 4-year-old. Say 1 and 1 is 2 with these people because they haven't looked into any of it. They don't know what the hell they're talking about.
It's true, unfortunately, in a lot of those aspects, and I think it really comes down to you kind of encapsulate what I do on UAP really right there, which is I present the stories, I present the details, and then you decide, right? I'm not going to force anybody to believe something, but I at least want you to know what's going on. I want you to know what the story is, what the witnesses said, what the whistleblowers are saying. And you're right, Tommy, now it's to the point where long are the days where the witness that people heard from was Farmer Joe, and he said he saw something take his cow.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. We're hearing from retired Navy rear admirals like Tim Gallaudet. We're hearing from former directors of Pentagon research groups like Lou Elizondo. We're hearing from pilots, Navy pilots like Ryan Graves and David Fravor, who these are legit people who have the resumes to back up what they're saying. They're not going to come out and tarnish their reputation. Those are just to name a few, by the way. There are so many more, whether it's people within the intelligence agencies or the military. There are so many, or just commercial pilots who also have something to lose. They have to write reports. They have to report to their superiors and things like that if they report seeing something strange in the sky. All those people are saying things now. It's not just Farmer Joe anymore. And so to your point, when people don't know that, when they haven't heard that, when they haven't seen 2 congressional hearings that have had these types of witnesses under oath, like a David Grush, Air Force veteran who was the head of a division to investigate UAP sightings and reports, who testifies under oath, Tommy, that we have, U.S. government has recovered biologics and downed craft, and that we are reverse engineering technology. So again, these are people that have a lot to lose, especially if they lie in front of Congress. And so when you present that to someone who isn't really into the topic or hasn't paid attention to what's happened really just within the past year or two, a lot of people find that shocking. And then I think that's when you have 2 roads. You either have someone say, okay, that's too much for me. I don't want to hear about it. I'm just worried about how I'm going to pay for my bills. Or you have someone say, whoa, are you serious? I need to look more into this. You have people reach those crossroads when those details are presented.
You say that in your show, you want people to make up their own minds. You're not there to answer these questions for them. You provide information and you hope that they come to their own conclusions after thinking about it. But how many shows have you done?
Somewhere close to 250, I think. It's been almost 4 years.
Are you really, at this point, thinking of yourself as someone who just is throwing out stuff and everybody kind of can make up their mind on their own? Or are you someone who's saying, let's at least establish that this much is known?
Yeah.
There are craft moving around all the time that defy our understanding of the laws of physics. There are craft moving around routinely, I will go so far as to say every day, that make no sense. That is not something that you say to someone, but, maybe you disagree and that's fine. I don't think you can disagree with that. That's a fact. Right?
Yeah. I'm right there with you, actually. And I think that's completely fair to say at this point. And I think, and you make a great point, and I do a little reflection when you mention that, and that, when I started off 4 years ago, it was really, let me just tell the stories that I like and do what you will with it. And I think you're right. I'm still doing that. But I think the decide for yourself mantra is now on a more detailed scale. I believe now I am operating, if I think about it, I'm operating from a point now 4 years later where it is more along the lines of, hey, let's just start at the basics, which actually goes to one of the names I mentioned, David Grush, one of the big whistleblowers who's testified in front of Congress. His thing has been, we need to reach what's called basic disclosure. And I've spoken about this on UAP, where other life are real. They've come here and we've recovered materials. If we can at least have those three basic truths out there, work your way from there. Okay, well, what do we mean by recovering materials? Have we reverse engineered technology to the point where we're traveling, through wormholes? Like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, you decide for yourself on that one, but it's to the point where you at least have to start with the basic truths that we're not alone. We have recovered stuff. This is something that's been going on for a long time. So I think you're right about that.
EcoFun Motorsports in Forest Lake puts the emphasis on fun. When was the last time you invested in the fun of life? It's not just for kids, Though EcoFun Motorsports does have the kids covered. Youth dirt bikes, youth ATVs. Actually, I want to highlight one ATV for the younger crew. It's the Orange Scout 110, designed for riders age 10 and up. Wildly popular because of its dependability and affordability. It has become EcoFun Motorsports' best-selling youth ATV. It's favored by kids, but also by their parents because of the focus on safety. Comes with a wireless engine shut-off remote, adjustable speed governor, allows young riders to learn safely while giving supervising parents peace of mind. You could feel good about this one, parents. Go to Forest Lake and take in the inventory at EcoFun Motorsports. And while you're there, get yourself a scooter, a Vespa, an e-bike, or a Yamaha and Kawasaki motorcycle. Don't let the kids have all the fun. That ain't right. American Pressure. American Pressure sells and services pressure washers, industrial pressure washers for businesses. There are a bunch of different kinds of pressure washers, different styles, different sizes. You want a pressure washer tailored for the work you do, and American Pressure knows how to take what you're using right now and dramatically improve on it, making your life so much easier. What is it worth to you to have your life at work made easier, while at the same time improving how everything functions on the job? Who wouldn't want to look into this? You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your business. American Pressure services pressure washers as well, coming out to your business in a service van. These are your buddies, people. These are your partners, your helpers in this crazy world of work. You have to work. I get it. You don't have to make it unnecessarily hard on yourself. Talk to the folks at American Pressure about how to make it easier on the job. Go to AmericanPressure.com.
You at least have to start with the basic truths that we're not alone. We have recovered stuff. This is something that's been going on for a long time.
Right there. That is a great starting point. And again, if anybody is listening right now and says, no way, you simply have not done the work. It's not like the Kennedy assassination. You can look into it and you can research it and you can conclude there was one gunman and make a pretty convincing case, and someone else can make a pretty convincing case that there was more than one gunman. It's not like that here anymore. We're not in that world anymore. If you look at everything that's known, and again, only a handful of people bother to do this, and I'll never fully understand why. If you look at everything that's known, what you said is the starting point. That's where our starting point is today. We have to all agree there has been craft retrieval. There have been attempts to reverse engineer what propels these crafts, and we are being visited. If we can start there, then I'm open to all sorts of different views and insights and debates. But what we just said is revolutionary. America is not there.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting that you say America specifically, because I do think when looking at how different cultures respond to this phenomenon, if you will, other cultures, especially South American cultures, seem to be more open to this. And I don't know why that is. I mean, you can theorize about that, but that's what I've noticed. And even European culture as well. I don't know if it's just a case of, are we distracted? There's just so much going on day to day. We got to take the kids to school and to practice, or I got to get to work. I'm stuck in traffic. I got to pay my bills and rent is due. It's just, so it is an interesting observation. In America, acceptance doesn't seem to be as readily available as it is in other parts of the world.
Not only is it the case that you can find citizens in other countries who are more accepting of this, governments in other countries are more open to talking about this, more accepting of it. We have a particularly closed government when it comes to this.
Boy, that you talk about going down the rabbit hole. That opens up a whole can of worms, I believe, Tommy. I think there's a couple of reasons to that when it comes to why our government seems like, a closed oyster when it comes to this. And that is, by the way, keeping in mind that there is a new transparency task force that has been started and has been underway for the past couple months with different members of Congress. And they are, working on this. I've spoken to one of them in Congressman Eric Burleson from Missouri. He's been on UAP a couple of times, and he's part of this transparency task force. And there's even news that I'm seeing here recently that supposedly the rumor is that he met with one of the names, coincidentally, David Grush, that was mentioned earlier, in a top secret meeting with AARO, which is the government agency that looks into these things. So that would be really big. And that would point to a direction of there are at least elements of the government that really are looking into this. But as a whole, that's the micro scale. On the macro, it absolutely is the truth, because I think what it comes down to is intelligence agencies, government contractors. There's a lot there where you have people who have been working in these positions 20, 30, 40 years, and they have a lot to lose, namely money, power, and quite possibly their freedom. If the president comes out tomorrow and says, in conjunction with Congress and the director of the FBI and CIA and director of national intelligence, we have concluded that we are not alone. Well, how are they going to answer for this? How are the 30-year, 40-year career men who have known about this since the 80s, and maybe even further back in some cases, how are they going to answer for the fact that they've been lying about this for decades?
Yeah, and again, there is some story out there that this is fairly recent, that this is somewhat new, that we're coming to this in the last several years. I was a kid when I did a report in science class on Project Blue Book, the code name for the U.S. Air Force study of unidentified flying objects. That was, I think, conducted from March of 52 to the end of the year in 69. Hundreds of sightings were found to be unexplainable. The Air Force had no idea what the hell those things were. Hundreds. After stringent analysis by the best minds in science and aviation, they put it under the label of unexplainable. which always seem like such a cop-out. Come on. It's kind of like a ship coming across the ocean. When the Portuguese explorer Magellan appeared with his ships on the horizon near the Philippines, the natives there had not seen anything like it, nor had the natives when Cortez and his fleet were seen sailing toward the Yucatan Peninsula. But you don't say unexplainable. What you say is, someone's in something I didn't know existed coming here from some other place. They could at least say that. I'm just going to put that under unexplainable, Bob. As you know, as you find out when you research this, respectable, knowledgeable government officials have been encountering these things since after World War II. It's been as much a story of the 50s and 60s as it is a modern story. Somehow we're spinning it now as a modern story because, as you say, it's going to look ugly for a lot of people if this isn't talked about as something we're just learning about now. What's glorious about this moment in history is so many people are stepping forward now. Former CIA people, former government officials, current military officials. So many people feel free to talk about it now. Astoundingly, journalists are still behind. Legitimate journalists are still terrified of this topic.
And I don't understand why. And I think there's still that sense of stigma to it, even though we've had the congressional hearings and the high-level witnesses come out, and more come out every week. There's like a new witness that's ready to come out and talk. You're right. When you watch any major news network, they still kind of like talk about it tongue in cheek. Oh, what was in the skies? Film coming up at 11. And it's like, guys, like there's real serious reporting that could be done here if you're just willing to do the work. And I'll do you one better, Tommy, when you talk about going back to the like World War II, like right around World War II and right in that time frame in the 40s, even before that, if we really want to get into the weeds, this is one of my favorite stories because you talk about unexplainable, right? This one is just, there's no good explanation for it. In April of 1897, in a town called Aurora in Texas, the townspeople there described a cigar-shaped craft crashing to the ground in 1897. And to this day, in 2025, we hear about cigar-shaped craft. So there's no way in 1897 for them to be on, Twitter or Instagram and hear about cigar shapes, and you have copycats who are just making something up to get famous and get clicks. It's not the way it worked 130 years ago or so. This craft, according to the locals, crashed into a windmill. There were bodies inside, and they had a burial. There was a grave. Now, people have tried to go to that burial site and dig it up, and of course, there's nothing there. So the theory is that someone took the bodies, agency, whoever, whatever you want to theorize, but it was in the local newspapers in 1897, and people just kind of went with it. They're like, all right, he's dead. We got to bury him. What was flying in a cigar-shaped craft in 1897?
Yeah, and what happens to me, and what I always use as a counter-argument to people who seem so incredulous, is if you heard just that story and nothing else. Well, sure, you could say, come on, the whole crew was drinking in that town that day. It must have been some sort of celebration. They were all hammered. The sheer number of reports over time, we're not even scratching the surface when I say there are lots and lots and lots and lots of stories, legitimate stories. It's so far beyond that. And I'm talking stories where people at military bases in large numbers are not only experiencing it visually, but having these craft affect the military base, shut it down. And not just one of those stories. I think that's the hardest thing. The stories are legion. If Thomas Jefferson sends out Lewis and Clark looking for a water passage to the northwest, and they come back and they say, there are these weird creatures out there I haven't seen before. We don't have them here. And they describe some creature of the northwest, a grizzly bear, or something, anything. Thomas Jefferson can say, well, I don't believe you. someone else can go out and come back. Actually, those guys, Lewis and Clark, they were right. I saw it too. I don't believe you either. What number do you get to before Thomas Jefferson is the moron? Way fewer than the number of people who have had these experiences. Who was the woman, reporter for the New York Times, who supposedly broke, quote unquote, this story back in 2017?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring her up. Leslie Kean. I give her all the credit in the world. She was brave enough to step out from the boundaries of, quote unquote, normal journalism and report on this. And she had reporting from Marco Rubio, who at that point was still a senator here in Florida, Harry Reid, former senator who's passed away. And, she really did her digging on that it was an amazing article. And we can actually, in my opinion, really point to that article as the genesis of the modern day UFO acceleration towards some type of truth coming out maybe someday, because it really helped to legitimize the conversation in a way that it hadn't done before, where a serious journalist like Leslie Kean from the New York Times to come out and write something like that with, senators to back her up in the article, it was a big deal. And to your point too, Tommy, you mentioned military bases, and I'm really glad you said that, because not only do we still have that happening to this day, where we have unexplained craft flying over military bases, but one of the more famous cases was back in 1967, a guy that I've spoken to by the name of Bob Salas, who was in the Air Force and worked at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. He was one of the guys that was in charge of the nuclear arsenal at Malmstrom in Montana in 1967. Pretty heightened state, obviously, back in the late 60s. And there was one night where these lights being reported from above ground, because they're in this underground base, they were getting reports of all these strange lights coming over, what's going on, what's happening. Next thing they know, the nukes go dead. They have no capabilities. Even if they wanted to fire them, they couldn't. The system died. It wasn't the Russians. It wasn't anybody else at that point. We couldn't blame Iran or China, not in 1967. So it's stuff like that when we point to the incursions over our military bases, those things are still happening today, and they're not reported. And that might be another reason why we have the government so clammed up about these things, because they might not want to admit to a certain extent that we might be out-teched.
Well, clearly, and again, this one story you just told, there are so many stories of these craft appearing at nuclear sites, to the point where, okay, clearly, who's ever in charge of these vessels has some interest in the fact that humanity has now reached a level where they can create nuclear weapons. And it is perhaps not coincidental that there was such an increase in these sightings after the explosion of the first atomic bomb. There's some tie-in there, because it keeps repeating. For me, it's always a numbers game. It's a numbers game in how many whistleblowers have come forth. It's a numbers game in how many sightings from legitimate people. It's a numbers game in how many stories are the same over and over again. It's a numbers game because I don't have an alien in front of me, because I don't have the craft that I can knock on like I can this piece of wood right here. Without that, I have to take the insights of smart, bright government, former government officials, military people, and legitimate citizens who not only don't have anything to gain by saying what they're saying, they have a tremendous amount to lose. People's lives have been destroyed by coming forward, just destroyed.
Yeah.
Why would you do that to yourself? Anybody witnessing that would say, well, I'm not coming forward. And yet still so many do, because let's face it, it is the greatest story going. I did a podcast on this once, Stephen, and I called it The Greatest Story Ever. And my feeling was, from the dawn of civilization to now, it's the greatest story. And if you'd have told me that the greatest story going, the best story out there, the most extraordinary tale to be told, the best piece of journalism anybody could chase, that wasn't being followed up on by people, by folks who are supposedly interested in going out and learning what's going on in this world. But it's not. And I guess, what was the name of the woman? Leslie Keene?
That's right.
She said, after that front page story of hers ran in the New York Times, that acknowledged that, yes, our government is routinely running into this stuff, and they have no idea what the hell they're looking at. She said, prior to looking into that story, it never would have crossed her mind ever for a second that she would ever stoop to get involved in this absurd, ridiculous subject matter. It was, she said, considered absolutely taboo in her profession. Silly. You were considered a silly person as a journalist to even look into this. Well, what the hell is that? So she gets a report from a colleague in France, the Cometa report, some 90-page study made by generals and admirals and police chiefs and all sorts of reputable people in France. They had spent 3 years studying all the official data on UFOs, and this means cases involving pilots, military officials, cases where there was a lot of data so they could eliminate all the conventional explanations. And this group of people drew the conclusion that the extraterrestrial hypothesis was the most rational and logical explanation. And she said, "You got to be kidding me. What? You're actually going with that?" Radar data, photographs, multiple witnesses, and they put it in black and white. The extraterrestrial hypothesis is the logical and rational one. There's something about our inability to just accept this. And do you ever ask yourself why there is that internal fight? Because if you look at this big old universe, the silliest thing you could come up with, I think the silliest thing would be, the craziest damn thing. I don't know, just that one little dot over there. That's it for anybody, for any intelligence. Otherwise, no, I don't know what the hell the rest of it's for. It must be decoration.
Right. And I'm with you. I mean, it is, to me, kind of a no-brainer, but why people kind of stop themselves from taking that next step, it's a great question, and it's maybe more even like of a philosophical one. And I think personally it has to do sometimes, not all the time, but it's this construct that we build for ourselves that says, because I have a certain faith, that tells me that there's nobody else and God only created human beings here on earth. This is not meant to be preachy or anything. I'm actually Catholic. So when I talk about this, I kind of look at it from that perspective of, I do go to church and I do have my faith system, but I kind of use that as a jumping point to say, why wouldn't an all-powerful God create other beings? Why would this all-powerful God only create one race? That's like saying Elon Musk only decided to work on rockets with SpaceX. No, he has like 4 or 5 different companies, right? So if you use that analogy just from a person, and then you extrapolate that out to the God of the universe, like, why would they only spend their infinite power on one race or one world? And for whatever reason, Tommy, I don't know why, I think people kind of get lost in the shuffle when it comes to religion, and they get scared. Like, they feel like they're breaking a rule if they try to think outside the box to say, well, maybe there are aliens, but maybe I shouldn't think that because that's not a good thing. Why not? Why can't we think that?
I first fell in love with Spectacle Shop 30 years ago, people. I started doing ads for them and became friends with the owner. He had a mantra: do everything differently. Don't copy others. Show them the way. Become the best eyewear shop in the state. Not by seeing how it should be done, by showing them how it should be done. Dave Ulrich of Spectacle Shop revolutionized the eyewear buying experience. But he didn't stop there. He told me to stay on top, you have to constantly innovate. You have to constantly be the best in every aspect of the eyewear purchase experience. Your staff, they have to be cool, smart, aware, fun to be around. Your eyewear has to be eyewear people cannot find just anywhere. You have to be the place other optical stores send their most complicated prescriptions. You have to work to call yourself the best. And Spectacle Shop has been voted best eyewear shop in Minnesota the last 4 years in a row by readers of the Star Tribune. Learn more at spectacleshop.com. I wanted to have my money work for me. I mean, get up out of my bank account and sweat. Get dirty. Work for me. Josh Arnold said, I know how to direct those dollar bills. Those dollars that are part of your retirement savings plan that are just sitting there lazily whiling away the hours doing nothing. Josh Arnold said to me, you want them sleeping on the job, or you want them delivering impressive dividends that will have you far better off than before you ever started cracking the whip? I said, Josh, you be the boss man. I don't know how to direct these SOBs. Josh said, I've been doing it successfully for over 40 years. Let me tell you about it. You call me up at 952-925-5608. I'll give you a 48-minute free consult. That's right, 48 minutes for nothing. Josh Arnold is the man.
Investment services offered by Josh Arnold Investment Consultant, LLC, a security and investment advisor. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risk. Tommy Mischke is a paid endorser.
I think people kind of get lost in the shuffle when it comes to religion.
The religion thing is a big part of it. And it would explain why in America there's more reluctance to accept this than in European countries. I think religion does play into it. There's also somebody who said to me one day, because the story doesn't ever go anywhere, it really never goes anywhere that gets to any place any of us can work with, people just move on and say, I gotta go grocery shopping. And I will say that sort of happened to me. I got so frustrated with the lack of disclosure. When that New York Times cover story came out, I thought this was going to be the beginning of us just all agreeing that this is happening and that there have been these crashes and it's been hidden. There have been retrieval of bodies and there's been reverse engineering. And by the way, there's compelling, I think, informational evidence that reverse engineering has been successful, that some of the craft people see are our own. There's so much more that I think we could agree on than we're agreeing on, and we could move this further down the field, the story. But there was this thing after that New York Times story broke where I was really getting into it, thinking I was going to get all these new stories every few months, more revealed, more revealed. I thought there was a disclosure project. I get it. You don't want to overwhelm us. You don't want to have mass panic. It's going to come out little bit at a time. But then there would seem to be a backlash, and there would be this shutting down. The spigot would dry up, and no more information, and, well, we don't really know what they are. And I'd say, really, we're going to play that game? Okay, I guess I'm going to move on, too. Because there just didn't seem to be a willingness to bring forward this story in a way that respected all of us as citizens who deserve to know.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, sometimes I think it's intentional to kind of have...
You mean intentional to keep the information from us?
Or to just to have that lull, you know what I mean? And to try to, like, for instance, when the drone thing was going on, like, it was really hot and heavy around the holidays, right, in late 2024. And then the holidays come, and the story disappears.
No, let's look at that a moment.
Yeah.
That was one of those things where I just sat back, just in my house, just saying to myself, what the hell? Where else, in any other area, would people encounter something like this and move on? Just move on with their day. It's the holidays, got stuff to do. I mean, wouldn't right after, I don't know, come something like, damn it to hell! We gotta find out what those are! Where was the guy saying that? I wanted one guy... Damn it to hell! Someone get me answers! Oval Office pounding on the desk! No, it's the holidays.
To your point about the presidents, I'll use plural because this happens at the end of Biden's term and at the beginning of Trump's term, where at the end of Biden's term, it was, well, we're not sure, but it's no threat. Trump, before he gets sworn in, is saying, we're going to find out. I don't understand why they haven't just told everybody. It's going to be one of the first things we find out. We'll let everybody know. So a couple of weeks in, they come out, Caroline Leavitt, press secretary, in her first press briefing ever. The first thing she says, we have an update on the drones. It's FAA authorized. It's all good. So moving on. And then you never heard about it again after that. Now, I tell that story because I speak to a guy. He goes by a pseudonym of Anthony Williams. And Anthony Williams doesn't use his real name because he's active military intelligence. And he's come on to my show, voice only, obviously, since he uses a fake name. He's not going to show his face. And he comes on to UAP and talks about nothing classified. No one wants to go to jail. But he talks about things that, from his perspective, being a veteran, multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and being active military intelligence, is able to come on and talk about what is going on behind the scenes. What are people looking into? What isn't on the news? What's being covered up? And when we spoke about President Trump's response to the drones, after saying that he was going to look into it and tell everybody what was happening, and then give us the answer that he got, what Anthony Williams said to me was, dude, that is the scariest thing I've ever heard in my entire career. Now, this is a guy, Tommy, let me frame this properly. This is a guy who was in Afghanistan during the horrible withdrawal that we had, where 13 of our service members died. He was there trying to get people out. And he tells me that President Trump's response that they came up with anyway, that was the scariest thing he's ever seen or heard in his career. Because there must be something so bad or so damaging that they have to come out and make up an obvious lie to cover it up and sweep it under the rug. Something's still going on with those to this day, and they do not want to say what it is.
Yeah, and I would say that everything we've talked about so far, it'd be in the category of everybody in this world looking into this topic is on the page we're on right now. We haven't scratched the surface of this topic. We've just kept this right now at a level that is, here's what we know. Here's what we can say we know. If you're going to argue with this, you're going to have a hard time coming up with a lot of evidence to argue against what we know right now. But it goes, as you know well, it goes into deeper levels and deeper levels and deeper levels where you can get more into debate. But where we are, you and I right now, this is just the basic 101 level of this story. It's why you get to do so many shows on this, because it goes on and on and on. It's a bottomless well. I don't know where the bottom is for information, for news stories, for interesting insights. It's why your show is so popular, because A, it's the greatest story there is. Give me anything that's even in the neighborhood of this story. And B, we can't seem to get to the bottom of it.
I'll give you another one. If you still have a couple minutes, I'll tell you the story.
Yeah.
Same source that I spoke about, Anthony Williams, military intelligence. And this story has, for whatever reason, not been picked up. And I don't know why. I don't know if it gets suppressed, if it gets ignored. I don't know what it is. But he tells the story, and I've related it a few different times in different formats, about October. So October of 24, then again in February of 25, where you have these giant black triangle craft flying over our secret nuclear installations. This isn't Malmstrom. This isn't one of the ones that we know about in Kansas or Montana or something like that. This was one of the secret locations out in the Colorado area. And these giant black triangles are flying over this area to the point where 2 Army helicopters are chasing them. This is a documented case. It happened twice that we know of, and no one talks about it. It's not on the news. It's not in the papers, and no one's talking about it. Why?
And I guess it's that frustration that I mean, more power to you for staying with this story. But it's that frustration that gets me turning elsewhere. If someone had said to me, Mischke, you want to have the top podcast around? You just follow this UFO UAP story. You'll have the number one most listened to podcast. I'd say, yeah, but what would I do with the headaches I'd have? What would I do with the days I wanted to scream? What would I do with the frustration over being treated like a child with information that should be given to all of us? What would I do with my stress levels? And I know guys who have written books on this topic. So they've published books, and they too have had this happen to them. They get so frustrated by the fact that the story isn't moving fast enough toward full disclosure that they say, screw it, life is short. I'm a 60-some-year-old man. I'll move on to other things. You have to make peace with the frustration.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that it's just, for me, I'm just so passionate about it that giving up on it has really never even crossed my mind, to be honest with you, because it's just something that I am starving for information on this. And when I find out that information, I'm just so amped up to try to get it out there to everyone and say, hey, look, here's what's going on. Or, hey, have you heard this story? And don't get me wrong, there are very much times of frustration dealing with social media trolls, people calling you all different types of names. And so there are those times of frustration for sure. But I'm so engrossed in it that I can't help but to continue to push forward.
Do you think there is one person in our government right now, an elected official, who has the ability and the interest in moving this story forward, or is the power not there, even if the desire is?
So from all indications that I've received, everything I've heard says that currently President Trump knows about this. I don't know if he knows everything, like all the fine details, because the way that the intelligence community and the contractors look at presidents, they look at them as part-time employees, essentially. And that's why really only a few of them have known. They say Nixon knew. They say that Carter knew about it a little bit. Eisenhower for sure. Clinton wanted to know, and they wouldn't tell him everything he wanted to know. But for whatever reason, Trump has been one of those guys that does know more than other presidents have.
And that makes perfect sense in the sense that we all know more than citizens that were around for those other presidents. Just by being around now, there's just a comfort level with more information getting out. What's unfortunate about it is it sounds like it's not information he feels any compulsion to pass along.
That's the most frustrating part. I'm with you.
On that note, I will close down this discussion because the next place I would be going would be into the rabbit hole, and I'm going to stop short of that. But tell people where they can find your podcast.
UAP, Unidentified Alien Podcast, but easier just putting in UAP wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll find it on Apple, on Amazon, on Spotify, and any of those places. But I have a lot of interviews up on YouTube. Check it out on YouTube. You can search UA Podcast, and that should come up. And Twitter, it's at UA Podcast 850. Do a lot of my social media, like 95% of it is on Twitter, so it's at UA Podcast 850. Search UAP wherever you get your podcasts. It'll pop up.
Really appreciate your generous offering of all this time, and I really have enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, likewise, Tommy. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. This is a blast. I don't really get to be a guest that often. So much of my time is taken up with creating the content, writing, producing, editing. So it's my pleasure to come on and be a guest. And anytime you want to do it again, I'm happy to do it. I love it.
Yeah, I hope to talk to you again sometime. You be well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.